Today we're going to be going over the top-down method, which essentially means we're going to be processing our mix bus first rather than going through the individual elements of our mix. The benefit you get from doing this is you get to put those broad strokes, those main tonal balances in, and then that will help you shape very quickly the sort of sound that you're hearing in your head. We have an EQ ready. Let's begin by setting this up. Just to give some insight into how we are setting up the EQ, I like to start by finding areas of the mix I want control over. Now I do this by boosting, which allows me to sweep around looking for areas I'm interested in. Here it helps to not think in terms of numbers like 500 Hz or 100 Hz, but instead think in terms of words which describe the characteristics you are actually looking for. So think like thump, boxiness, brightness, for instance. Here I'm just checking the reference track. In this instance, I'm using the reference track like a palette cleanser to keep me grounded. It essentially helps me identify if my mix has any obvious tonal balance issues in relation to something that is a finished master. There are other ways to use reference tracks, but that's not for this lesson. I'm going to A-B the EQ now to hear what changes I've made overall. Now notice how long I take to switch the EQ on and off. This is important because you have to give your ears time to readjust to new sounds so you can hear effectively what you've actually changed. So what have I done and why? Starting with the low shelf, I felt the track needed more weight on the bottom end. The mix is sounding a little bit thin to my ears, so the low shelf is going to help me out with that. The bell curve at around 200 Hz is just ducking out some boomy low mids which were present in the bass and also the low-pitched percussion. Remember, we are going for a modern mix style with tight lows and pushed mids. The dip around 200 Hz has the same effect as raising the upper mids. If you think of it like a set of scales, as you take away from one side, the other side will appear to be heavier, but it's actually not changed its weight, if that makes any sense. The upper mid push around 2K and the high shelf go hand in hand. I just wanted to naturally bring out some presence in the upper mids while simultaneously bringing out some detail from the top end. This EQ style tends to yield a very natural sound. Now this is because I utilise fairly low Q values, which result in these very wide EQ curves. The reason this is natural sounding is because you're essentially preserving the harmonic relationships with the large band boosts and ducks. So take the 2K boost as an example. If you look, 1K is being boosted only a little less than the point frequency. This is a natural and musical way of EQing. So firstly, we have the virtual channel console from Slate Digital, which is preceded by the revival. With the virtual channel console, we have a few mix desk models to choose from. I find the best way to choose what saturation model you want is to add a lot of drive so that the effect is more apparent, and then cycle through each model listening for these subtle differences, and when you find one that you like, obviously then back it off to a more appropriate level. I ended up settling for the Brit 4KE. The differences between each model is fairly subtle, but the 4KE tends to lend itself more to the aggressive mixing style we're going to be going for in this track. From this moment on, whenever I use the VCC plugin, I'll most likely use the Brit 4KE by default on each track and bus. Right, let's set up Revival. We're just adding a little bit of boost on both of the shimmer and thickness knobs. It's essentially adding some harmonics at the very top end, which is going to bring out some detail from the strums and also the bow sound of the violin. It's going to allow that to cut through a little bit more. In terms of the thickness style, that's adding more harmonic density in the lows, which is going to help us from sounding too thin. So as we bring up the shimmer, we may sound a little bit thin, bring up the thickness knob, and it kind of rebalances that. Right, let's set up the virtual bus compressor. That's actually all we'll be doing with the compressor for now. At this point, I'm not actually interested in using it as a compressor. Instead, what I'm doing is I'm setting up the level of drive that I want, which is going to impart some of its own unlinearities in the mix. Later on, we will actually be setting up the compression parameters. Finally, we'll be setting up the virtual tape machine. First thing I want to point out here is the bass alignments. Because the virtual tape machine is so colourful on the bottom end, it adds a significant low bump to the mix. The bass alignment function allows us to correct for this, so in this instance what I want is the added harmonic density without the overall tonal change in the lows. So here a setting of about minus 1.5 dB did the trick. Now for the rest of the parameters, it's just a case of cycling through each option. Now I wouldn't advise being too obsessed here because there are so many permutations. Going through each one would give you diminished returns in my opinion. The key is it's adding harmonic density, which is going to help the track avoid sounding too clinical because we're working completely in the box. Now as long as it does that, I'm happy. Let's do a quick A/B and make sure that we're happy with the changes that we've made. That's all of our mix bus processing out of the way now. Let's do an A/B of the entire mix bus and review what we have done. To me, the biggest thing is that the mix is starting to sound a lot fuller and more impactful, and all we've done is added a little bit of EQ and saturation. Now, as we alter the sound flowing into the mix bus, these saturators will give us complex interactions, essentially simulating an analog environment. Just a quick note to finish up on, the mix bus EQ may need retweaking as we go along. I won't be showing every little retweak I do because it's not important to the tutorial. The point I'm making is the EQ is not a set it and forget it job. Anyway, that wraps it up for today. Thank you for watching. Join me next time where we're going to be setting up the processing for our percussion, bass rhythm section and also the lead section. I'll catch you next time.